Section 12 of Scott's Last Expedition, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Scott's Last Expedition, Volume 1. The Journals of Robert Falcon Scott, arranged by Leonard Huxley. Third part of Chapter 5. Depot laying to One Ton Camp. Friday, February 10th. Number 9 Camp. 12 miles 200 yards. Cold march, very chilly wind. Overcast sky. Difficult to see surface or course. Noticed sledges, ponies, etc. cast shadows all around. Surface very good and animals did splendidly. We came over some undulations during the early part of the march, but the last part appeared quite flat. I think I remember observing the same fact on our former trip. The wind veers and backs from south to west and even to north, coming in gusts. The sastrugi are distinctly south-southwest. There isn't a shadow of doubt that the prevailing wind is along the coast, taking the curve of the deep bay south of the bluff. The question now is, shall we by going due southward keep this hard surface? If so, we shall have little difficulty in reaching the Beardmore Glacier next year. We turn out of our sleeping bags about 9 p.m. Somewhere about 11:30 I shout to the soldier, "How are things?" There is a response suggesting readiness, and soon after figures are busy amongst sledges and ponies. It is chilling work for the fingers and not too warm for the feet. The rugs come off the animals, the harness is put on, tents and camp equipment are loaded on the sledges, nose bags filled for the next halt. One by one the animals are taken off the picketing rope and yoked to the sledges. Oates watches his animal warily, reluctant to keep such a nervous creature standing in the traces. If one is prompt, one feels impatient and fretful whilst watching one's more tardy fellows. Wilson and Meares hang about ready to help with odds and ends. Still we wait. The picketing lines must be gathered up. A few pony puttees need adjustment. A party has been slow striking their tent. With numbed fingers on our horse's bridle and the animal striving to turn its head from the wind, one feels resentful. At last all is ready. One says, "All right, Bowers, go ahead," and Bertie leaps his big animal forward, starting as he continues at a steady pace. The horses have got cold, and at the word they are off, the soldiers and one or two others with a rush. Finneskoe give poor foothold on the slippery sastrugi, and for a minute or two drivers have some difficulty in maintaining the pace on their feet. Movement is warming, and in 10 minutes the column has settled itself to steady marching. The pace is brisk, the light bad, and at intervals one or another of us suddenly steps on a slippery patch and falls prone. These are the only real incidents of the march. For the rest it passes with a steady tramp and slight variation of formation. The weaker ponies drop a bit, but not far, so that they are soon up to the line again when the first halt is made. We have come to a single halt in each half march. Last night it was too cold to stop long, and a very few minutes found us on the go again. As the end of the half march approaches I get out my whistle. Then at a shrill blast Bowers wheels slightly to the left, his tent mates lead still farther out to get the distance for the picket lines. Oates and I stop behind Bowers and Evans, the two other sledges of our squad behind the two other of Bowers. So we are drawn up in camp formation. The picket lines are run across at right angles to the line of advance and secured to the two sledges at each end. In a few minutes ponies are on the lines covered, tents up again and cookers going. Meanwhile the dog drivers, after a long cold wait at the old camp, have packed the last sledge and come trotting along our tracks. They try to time their arrival in the new camp immediately after our own and generally succeed well. The mid-march halt runs into an hour to an hour and a half, and at the end we pack up and tramp forth again. We generally make our final camp about 8 o'clock, and within an hour and a half most of us are in our sleeping bags. Such is at present the daily routine. At the long halt we do our best for our animals by building snow walls and improving their rugs, etc. Saturday, February 11th. No. 10 Camp. Bearings, latitude 78° 47'. Bluff south 79 west, left extreme bluff 65°. Bluff A, White Island near Sound. 11 miles. Covered 6 and 5 miles between halts. The surface has got a good deal softer. In the next 2 marches we should know more certainly, but it looks as though the conditions to the south will not be so good as those we have had hitherto. Blossom, Evans' pony, has very small hooves and has found the going bad. It is less a question of load than one of walking, and there is no doubt that some form of snow shoe would help greatly. The question is, what form? All the ponies were a little done when we stopped, but the weather is favourable for a good rest. There is no doubt this night marching is the best policy. Even the dogs found the surface more difficult to day, but they are pulling very well. Meares has deposed Osman in favour of Rabchick, as the former was getting either very disobedient or very deaf. The change appears excellent. Rabchick leads most obediently. Memorandum for next year: a stout male bamboo shod with a spike to sound for crevices. Saturday, February 12. No. 11 Camp. 10 miles. Depot 1 bale of fodder. Variation: 150 east-south true, north 30 east by compass. The surface is getting decidedly worse. The ponies sunk quite deep every now and again. We marched 6 1/4 miles before lunch, Blossom dropping considerably behind. He lagged more on the second march and we halted at 9 miles. Evans said he might be dragged for another mile and we went on for that distance and camped. The sky was overcast, very dark and snowy looking in the south, very difficult to steer a course. Mount Discovery is in line with the south end of the bluff from the camp and we are near the 79th parallel. We must get exact bearings for this is to be called the Bluff Camp, and should play an important part in the future. Bearings: Bluff 36° 13', Black Island, right X. I have decided to send E. Evans, Forde, and Keohane back with the 3 weakest ponies, which they have been leading. The remaining 5 ponies which have been improving in condition will go on for a few days at least, and we must see how near we can come to the 80th parallel. To night we have been making all the necessary arrangements for this plan. Cherry Garrard is to come into our tent. Monday, February 13th. No. 12 Camp. 9 miles, 150 yards. The wind got up from the south with drift before we started to day, all appearance of a blizzard. But we got away at 12:30 and marched through drift for 7 miles. It was exceedingly cold at first. Just at starting the sky cleared in the wonderfully rapid fashion usual in these regions. We saw that our camp had the southern edge of the base rock of the bluff in line with Mount Discovery, and White Island well clear of the eastern slope of Mount Erebus, a fairly easy alignment to pick up. At lunch time the sky lightened up and the drift temporarily ceased. I thought we were going to get in a good march, but on starting again the drift came thicker than ever and soon the course grew wild. We went on for 2 miles and then I decided to camp. So here we are, with a full blizzard blowing. I told Wilson I should camp if it grew thick, and hope he and Meares have stopped where they were. They saw Evans start back from No. 11 Camp before leaving. I trust they have got in something of a march before stopping. This continuous bad weather is exceedingly trying, but our ponies are quite comfortable this time, I'm glad to say. We have built them extensive snow walls behind which they seem to get quite comfortable shelter. We are 5 in a tent yet fairly comfortable. Our ponies' coats are certainly getting thicker, and I see no reason why we shouldn't get to the 80th parallel if only the weather would give us a chance. Bowers is wonderful. Throughout the night he has worn no headgear but a common green felt hat, kept on with a chin strap, and affording no cover whatever for the ears. His face and ears remain bright red. The rest of us were glad to have thick balaclavas and wind helmets. I have never seen anyone so unaffected by the cold. To night he remained outside a full hour after the rest of us had got into the tent. He was simply pottering about the camp doing small jobs to the sledges, etc. Cherry Garrard is remarkable because of his eyes. He can only see through glasses and has to wrestle with all sorts of inconveniences in consequence. Yet one would never guess it, for he manages somehow to do more than his share of the work. Tuesday, February 14th. 13 Camp. 7 miles, 650 yards. A disappointing day. The weather had cleared, the night was fine, though cold, temperature well below zero with a keen southwest breeze. Soon after the start we struck very bad surface conditions. The ponies sank lower than their hocks frequently and the soft patches of snow left by the blizzard lay in sandy heaps, making great friction for the runners. We struggled on, but found Gran with Weary Willy dropping to the rear. I consulted Oates as to the distance and he cheerfully proposed 15 miles for the day. This piqued me somewhat and I marched till the sledge meter showed 6½ miles. By this time Weary Willy had dropped about 3/4 of a mile and the dog teams were approaching. Suddenly we heard much barking in the distance, and later it was evident that something had gone wrong. Oates and I then hurried back. I met Meares who told me the dogs of his team had got out of hand and attacked Weary Willy when they saw him fall. Finally they had been beaten off and Weary Willy was being led without his sledge. Weary Willy had been much bitten, but luckily I think not seriously. He appears to have made a gallant fight and bit and shook some of the dogs with his teeth. Gran did his best, breaking his ski stick. Meares broke his dog stick; one way and another the dogs must have had a rocky time, yet they seem to bear charmed lives when their blood is up, as apparently not one of them has been injured. After lunch 4 of us went back and dragged up the load. It taught us the nature of the surface more than many hours of pony leading. The incident is deplorable and the blame widespread. I find Weary Willy's load was much heavier than that of the other ponies. I blame myself for not supervising these matters more effectively, and for allowing Weary Willy to get so far behind. We started off again after lunch, but when we had done 2/3 of a mile, Weary Willy's condition made it advisable to halt. He has been given a hot feed, a large snow wall and some extra sacking. The day promises to be quiet and warm for him, and one can only hope that these measures will put him right again. But the whole thing is very annoying. Memorandum: Arrangements for ponies: 1. Hot bran or oat mashes. 2. Clippers for breaking wires of bales. 3. Pickets for horses. 4. Lighter ponies to take 10-foot sledges. The surface is so crusty and friable that the question of snow shoes again becomes of great importance. All the sastrugi are from S.W. to S. by S.W., and all the wind that we have experienced in this region, there cannot be a doubt that the wind sweeps up the coast at all seasons. A point has arisen as to the deposition. David called the crusts seasonal. This must be wrong; they mark blizzards, but after each blizzard fresh crusts are formed over only by the patchy heaps left by the blizzard. A blizzard seems to leave heaps which cover anything from 1/6 to 1/3 of the whole surface. Such heaps presumably turn hollows into mounds with fresh hollows between; these are filled in turn by ensuing blizzards. If this is so, the only way to get at the seasonal deposition would be to average the heaps deposited and multiply this by the number of blizzards in the year. Monday, February 15th. 14 Camp, 7 miles 775 yards. The surface was wretched to day; the two drawbacks of yesterday, the thin crusts which let the ponies through, and the sandy heaps which hang on the runners, if anything exaggerated. Bowers' pony refused to work at intervals for the first time. His hind legs sink very deep. Weary Willy is decidedly better. The soldier takes a gloomy view of everything, but I've come to see that this is a characteristic of him. In spite of it he pays every attention to the weaker horses. We had frequent halts on the march, but managed 4 miles before lunch, and 3½ after. The temperature was –15° at the lunch camp. It was cold sitting in the tents waiting for the ponies to rest. The thermometer is now –7°, but there is a bright sun and no wind, which makes the air feel quite comfortable. One's socks and finnesko dry well. Our provision allowance is working out very well. In fact all is well with us except the condition of the ponies. The more I see of the matter the more certain I am that we must save all the ponies to get better value out of them next year. It would have been ridiculous to have worked some out this year as the soldier wished. Even now I feel we went too far with the first 3. One thing is certain, a good snowshoe would be worth its weight in gold on this surface, and if we can get something really practical we ought to greatly increase our distances next year. Memorandums: Storage of biscuit next year, lashing cases on sledges. Look into sledge meter. Picket lines for ponies. Food tanks to be size required. 2 sledges altered to take steel runners. Stowage of pony food, enough sacks for ready bags. Thursday, February 16th. 6 miles 1450 yards. 15 Camp. The surface a good deal better, but the ponies running out. 3 of the 5 could go on without difficulty. Bowers' pony might go on a bit, but Weary Willy is a good deal done up, and to push him further would be to risk him unduly, so to morrow we turn. The temperature on the march to night fell to –21° with a brisk S.W. breeze. Bowers started out as usual in his small felt hat, ears uncovered. Luckily I called a halt after a mile and looked at him. His ears were quite white. Cherry and I nursed them back whilst the patient seemed to feel nothing but intense surprise and disgust at the mere fact of possessing such unruly organs. Oates's nose gave great trouble. I got frostbitten on the cheek lightly, as also did Cherry Garrard. Tried to march in light woolen mitts to great discomfort. Friday, February 17th. Camp 15. Latitude 79° 28½ south. It clouded over yesterday. The temperature rose and some snow fell. Wind from the south, cold and biting, as we turned. We started to build the depot. I had intended to go on half a march and return to same camp, leaving Weary Willy to rest, but under the circumstances did not like to take risk. Stores left in depot. Latitude 29° 29'. Depot. 245 lbs. 7 weeks full provision bags for 1 unit. 12 lbs. 2 days provision bags for 1 unit. 8 lbs. 8 weeks tea. 31 lbs. 6 weeks extra butter. 176 lbs. Biscuits. 7 weeks full biscuits. 85 lbs. 8½ gallons of oil. 12 weeks oil for 1 unit. 850 lbs. 5 sacks of oats. 424 lbs. 4 bales of fodder. 250 lbs. A tank of dog biscuit. 100 lbs. 2 cases of biscuit. Total 2,181 lbs. 1 skein white line. 1 set breast harness. 2 12-foot sledges. 2 pair skis, 1 pair of ski sticks. 1 minimum thermometer. 1 tin Rowntree cocoa. 1 tin matches. With packing we have landed considerably over a ton of stuff. It is a pity we couldn't get to 80°, but as it is we shall have a good leg up for next year and can at least feed the ponies full up to this point. Our Camp 15 is well marked, I think. Besides the flagstaff and black flag we have piled biscuit boxes, filled and empty, to act as reflectors, secured tea tins to the sledges which are planted upright in the snow. The depot cairn is more than 6 foot above the surface, very solid and large. Then there are the pony protection walls, altogether it should show up for many miles. I forgot to mention that looking back on the 15th we saw a cairn built on a camp 12½ miles behind. It was miraged up. It seems as though some of our party will find spring journeys pretty trying. Oates's nose is always on the point of being frostbitten. Meares has a refractory toe which gives him much trouble. This is the worst prospect for summit work. I've been wondering how I shall stick the summit again, as this cold spell gives ideas. I think I shall be all right, but one must be prepared for a pretty good doing. End of Chapter 5